Okay. Okay, we're going to start the fourth and final class in outsmarting anti-Semitism. You need a book right there. Okay. Okay. Today we're going to learn about what does one actually do living in a generation of anti-Semites. How do we approach this threat? Now, not talking about necessarily the Haman anti-Semite or the Nazi anti-Semite who's out to obliterate the Jew completely, but people that say things that are negative about Jews and so on. How do we approach it? Do we go at them with spears? Or are there other ways to go about it? This we're going to learn about today. And actually, the model we're going to learn about today is actually from this past Shabbat.
Rabbi, you're very low.
Very low?
I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but I can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
It's fine on my end. Karen, see if you can put your volume up.
Yeah, I did.
Is anyone else hear me low?
No, I can hear you well.
Fine on my end.
You're fine.
All right, I'll try again. Thank you.
We can hear you now.
How about now? Do you hear me now?
Karen, you're muted.
You're good. You're good.
Karen, you're muted.
We can hear you now.
Okay. You know what the problem could be? I don't know. No. Okay. Please turn to page 113, lesson 4, called A Change of Heart. As I was saying, today's lesson will be using this past Shabbat's Torah portion as a model how to deal with anti-Semitism. And what should our approach be in a very practical way? Change of heart, psychology, neuroscience, and recent history shows us that neither friend nor foe should be ever taken for granted. With a bit of subtlety and conviction, and always with trust in Hashem, we find that the dark days of the past are no cause for pessimism ahead. One of the mistakes that we have made is the people who we believe are our friends, we believe are going to be our friends forever. And those that we view as they're not our friends, we view them as haters forever. And history has shown that that is not true at all. The one that has been our friend can turn on a dime and become a non-friend and vice versa as well. So what should our approach be? So we're going to use the situation of prior to the 6-Day War as a backdrop to what happened in those few years before and after, something that involved the Rebbe of blessed memory, as a backdrop. And again, as I said, the story with Jacob and Esau as a biblical backdrop. So let's get right into it. The first mistake that people make is that we classify people. These people are for us and these people are against us. And the people that are for us, we can take them for granted. The people that are against us, they have to be banished. This course is going to take an opposite view. Here is the backdrop. So we know that prior to the 6-Day War, Israel had a contract with France for Mirage jets. Those jets were not delivered because Charles de Gaulle had let's call it a change of heart, and he imposed an embargo against any sales to both sides of the conflict in the Middle East. So we're not selling arms to either side. Now we know what that means, either side. The Arabs at that time had a supplier, they had Russia. So not giving to either side, we know who gets hurt by that. To make matters even worse, the Prime Minister of France, who took over after him, actually sold Mirage jets to Libya. Now, technically, Libya was not one of the border nations to Israel. So maybe they don't fit that embargo. But as we're going to read in the readings, there was a serious doubt whether these jets would remain in the hands of Libya or not. Let's turn to page 116. After much hesitation, French officials acknowledged tonight that about 50 Mirage jet fighter planes would be sold to Libya. Confirmation of the sale was expected to provoke sharp protests from Israel. The Israelis suspect that the planes will sooner or later find their ways to the fighting fronts. The French defense minister reaffirmed the French embargo policy of selling no arms to countries directly in conflict: Israel, the United Arab Republic, Jordan, and Syria. United Arab Republic is Egypt. And said that they were convinced that Libya sought to supply her own forces. Israeli fears of the Libyan mirages is based on a conviction shared by some French experts that the Libyan Air Force, in its present state, could not absorb such numbers of highly advanced planes. The fear is compounded by the aggressive stance taken towards Israel by the new revolutionary military regime, which had been in power in Libya since early September. The plane sold to Libya is believed to be the Mirage 3, the same type as the 50 built for Israel, but placed under embargo in 1967. The Israelis are expected to find particularly galling the fact that they have been denied about the same number of planes now made available to a hostile Arab country. So, what would be the best strategy to deal with a public figure who takes an unfavorable position towards us? List 3 significant do's and don'ts. Okay, write this down for yourself. What would be the best strategy for dealing with a public figure? Doesn't have to be a politician, any public figure who takes an unfavorable position towards us. Now, we learned last week that the current anti-Israel is anti-Semitism, as we qualified it with the 3 Ds. When you demonize Israel, when you make a distinction between Israel and other countries and so on. So what do we do with a public figure, whether a politician or a movie star, other people who take unfavorable positions towards Jews? How do we deal with it? What are the do's and what are the don'ts? Now, this is a question that Jews have been dealing for a long time. In the first part of today's lesson, we're going to explore some Torah sources that touch on this subject. So just to give everyone, for those that are not familiar with this past week's Torah subject, basically Jacob's twin brother was Esau, and Esau was trying to kill Jacob. Why? Because he believed Jacob took the blessings that he would have gotten from his father, which got into another discussion because he sold the birthright to his brother when they were just 13 years old or 15 years old, to be more exact. So Jacob is sent to Syria to stay away from Esau and get married within the family. And now it's 20 years later, and Jacob is coming back, and he sends messengers. That's how this week's Torah portion starts. He sends messengers of hope and the reconciliation to Esau. The messengers come back and say, Esau is not interested in reconciliation. He's heading towards you with 400 men. What does Jacob do? What does Jacob do when he knows that his hater is coming towards him? We find that Jacob did three things. He prayed, like we learned in the end of the first class, that ultimately, throughout history, we have to know that our success, everything we do, is a vehicle for success, but ultimately the success comes from a blessing from above. So he davened to Hashem, but we also know that Hashem says, I help those who help themselves. I need you to make a vessel, a vehicle. You want it to grow. You want your farm to grow. You have to seed it, you have to plant it, and so on. You want my blessing. The blessing has to take root into something. So what did Jacob do besides daven? He prepared himself with another two things. He prepared himself for war because he knew that's a very, very serious threat. It's coming with 400 men. And he also prepared a lavish gift. Not only did he prepare a lavish gift, the Torah describes a lavish gift. How many camels, how many sheep. Not only did he prepare a lavish gift, he set the lavish gift to be not one gift in one shot. He created one group of animals and he put it in the hands of a shepherd and said, go towards Esau. Then he made a space, right? A little while later, another shepherd. A little while later, another shepherd. So the gift came in in pieces. And each one of these shepherds was told that when he approaches Esau, you should tell them that behind us is your brother, your servant. He told him the exact words to say, your brother, your servant, who is looking forward to your reconciliation, and he wants to give you these gifts. Very, very, let's call it soothing words, positive words, and so on. He prepared that, but he also prepared for war. As the Torah tells us, he split the camp, and if one gets hit, the other one can escape, and so on. So three things the Talmud says he prepared for the encounter with Esau: prayer, and then gift, and then war. The gift in war are the physical things that he can do, which God's blessing would take root in one of the two. And then he knew that he needs God's blessing, and that's what he did. He davened to Hashem. That was the model of what actually happened. What actually happened is, we're going to read in text number 2. First, let's read text number 2, which the Medrash tells us, that which I just explained. Jacob, page 119, Jacob prepared himself for a three-pronged response: prayer, gift, and armed struggle. What happens? As Esau sees all these gifts, 1, 2, 3, and then he sees Jacob behind these 3 huge livestock gifts. What does Esau do? Says the Torah in text number 3, Esau ran toward Jacob and embraced him. He fell on Jacob's neck and kissed him, and they wept. So think about this. Jacob is being told that his brother's coming with 400 men. What are the odds of coming with 400 men to give him a kiss? The odds were they were coming with 400 men to fight. And there's actually a discussion among the commentaries. Did Esau already tell his messengers we're coming to fight? Or did the messengers get the message when they saw Esau mobilizing 400 men? Either way, there was a very good chance. We most probably could say that the overwhelming testimony of the messengers would lead an average person to believe he's coming for war. What did Jacob do? He prayed. Fine. You got to pray. You need Hashem to be on your side. But what did he do? He didn't just prepare for war. He prepared on both sides. He prepared the gift and the war, hoping that that the gift will work, and God forbid if it doesn't, he has a backup plan. but he went with the kind way as well, because it wasn't just a gift. It was very soothing words. As Rashi explains, that the subtle message to Esau was, you're jealous of me because of the blessings I took, but our father blessed us that I'll be wealthy from the produce of the land, meaning fruit, right? Fruit, vegetables, things that grow. And my wealth is not that. My wealth is livestock. And that was the message he tried. But he sent a reconciliatory message to Esau. And we see that Esau, when he came towards Jacob, he ran towards him and he hugged him and kissed him, and they both cried. Now, what's interesting is the Torah has no vowels, but there's an interesting phenomenon in the Torah. Some words, very rarely, but some words have dots on top of the word, dots. And those words, sometimes all the letters have dots, sometimes some of the letters have dots, and those dots basically tell us that we have to take the word out of context. It's not literal. So the Talmud has a discussion on the words in the Torah that it says that Esau kissed Jacob. There are dots. What do those dots mean? So follow in text number 4. Text number 4. The Talmud says, what is the Sifri says, what is it? Why are there dots? The Torah features dots over the words, and he kissed him. This is because Esau did not kiss Jacob wholeheartedly. Normally, you would think if someone hugs you, that's one level of friendship. If a person kisses, it's the next level of friendship. So the Torah puts the dots on the word, and he kissed him, that you should know that even though he did kiss him, but it didn't come from the bottom of his heart. It was just an external kiss. That's one opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is the author of the Zohar. Besides being a great rabbi in the revealed part of Torah, he's the author of the Zohar, the fundamental book of Jewish mysticism. What does Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said? It's an established fact that Esau hates Jacob. So therefore, if the Torah wanted to tell us that the kiss was not genuine, you wouldn't put the dots, because we know that Esau hates Jacob. So the assumption would anyway be that he didn't kiss him wholeheartedly. So why did the Torah put the dots here? On the opposite, to tell us right then, from that moment, he did kiss him wholeheartedly. Rabbi Shimon Yochai said it's an established fact that Esau hates Jacob. Nevertheless, his compassion was moved at that moment, and he kissed him wholeheartedly. So therefore, for that second, it was wholeheartedly. You would think that it wasn't wholeheartedly, because we're dealing with Esau. It comes the Torah and puts the dots to tell us that he kissed him wholeheartedly. The point being, the point of this shows that what happened, obviously Jacob's prayer worked. But how, in which one of the vehicles? He prepared 2 vehicles. He prepared 2 mediums. The medium, let's call it of the political medium, to be nice and give gifts and speak kindly. He also prepared for a tough medium of war. Which medium actually ended up Jacob using? Which medium did God actually give Jacob success in? In the medium of let's call it the political way of being nice and soothing and calming and so on. And this is a lesson in general when we face adversity and those that are against us. And again, I'm not talking about the extreme cases like Haman or Nazis. I'm talking about the occasional anti-Semite or the political anti-Semite, who we call them an anti-Semite because they say things that are against us. Not always by protesting and by shouting anti-Semite, 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 are we gaining foothold. It could be the blessing would be in the opposite, and we have to be ready for both. And we find throughout history, actually, even in worse situations that we face in today's day and age, that governments that were oppressive to the Jewish people, there were always what we call shtadlanim. There were always Jews that had some political influence. They were wealthy, and they had friends who were friends with political figures. We always tried that way And we're going to learn some of the cases in the Talmud, going back to Roman times, because we faced terrible, terrible anti-Semitism, not just during the time of the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, but post destruction of the Second Temple, like we learned in the earlier classes with Adrian and so on. Hello. What boxes are there? Okay, we'll do it. Okay, if you can. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. We know, and the commentaries talk about it. Nachmanides actually talks about it on this case. We have a rule in Torah, in Judaism. It's called Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, which means the stories in the Torah are not historical, are not there for history. The Torah is not a history book. The Torah is called Torah because it's a book of teaching. It's a lesson for future generations. Not all stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are recorded in the Torah, because the Torah is not a diary, it's not a history book. It's a book of lessons. And everything, all the stories we find up from our forefathers is really a lesson in our day-to-day life. And this story specifically, we find that Nachmanides talks about how this story of how Jacob prepared for a potential all-out fight with Esau is really a lesson for all generations. Follow me in text number 5 on page 121. The Midrash relates that Rabbi Yanai was one of the rabbis that lived post the Second Temple destruction. When he would set out for a meeting with the Roman government, he would first read this passage in the Torah regarding Jacob and Esau. Before he would approach the Roman government pleading for something on behalf of the Jewish people, the first thing he would do is read the story of Esau and Jacob. The sages had a tradition that this passage was a guide for our exile. Therefore, when Rabbi Yanai would visit the rulers of the Rome for communal issues, he would consult this passage to follow the advice of the wise Jacob. It is indeed appropriate for all generations to study this approach and to adopt it in actual practice. The approach that Jacob took, to be careful and make sure you can fight if you're able to fight if you have to fight. But that's sort of the backup plan. The first plan is a plan of reconciliation, even though you're dealing with an anti-Semite. And in the case of Jacob, he gave a gift, he said soothing words. Taking that approach and having a backup plan, says Nachmanides, this is a lesson for future generations. And we see this in the Talmud specifically, that Rabbi Yanai, before he would meet Roman officials, when he needed to intercede on behalf of the Jewish people, he always read the story of Jacob and Esau. To him, this was the lesson for life. And here we find something interesting, the next reading, just a little bit of a background. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was the author of the Zohar, many of you know that he had to hide in a cave for 12 years. He lived like a hermit for 12 years with his son because the Romans were looking to kill him. Why were the Romans looking to kill him? Because the Romans were told, the emperor was told that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they had spies in the Jewish community, that once in the synagogue there was a farbrengen, a gathering, and someone said, look what the Romans do for us. They build the bridges and they pave roads and so on. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, are you crazy? You think they're doing it because they care about us? It has nothing to do with us. It's just a way to extract money and taxes from us. They don't really care at all about us. So the word got back to Rome and they were trying to kill him. At that time, he had to hide for 12 years until that emperor died. He came out, he actually went in for a 13th year and so on, right? And we know Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, his stance towards Rome. By the way, Esau, when we talk about Rome is called in Hebrew Edom. Edom is the name for Esau. So Esau is, when we say that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that it's a fact that Esau hates Jacob, it's not just the first Esau and Jacob. It's the descendants of Esau, which are Rome, and descendants of Jacob, which are the Jewish people. So if Shimon bar Yochai is the one that said, right, in his commentary, he's the one that says, the law is Esau has Jacob. If the Torah says here that he kissed him and puts dots, the Torah is telling us that this is the exception to the rule, and he did kiss him for real. This same Rav Shimon bar Yochai, this same Rabbi Shimon, the Talmud tells us in text number 6, the Roman government once issued a decree that Jews may not observe Shabbos, circumcision, and family plurality. The Jews said to themselves, who should go to Rome to solicit annulment of the decree? You know who they sent? They sent, let Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai go, for he is experienced in miracles. Who did they send? They sent someone that knows very well, didn't fool himself at all. He knew very well who the enemy was, and he talks about in his commentaries that Esau hates Jacob and that Rome hates us. But they sent him because even someone that recognizes who his enemy is, he has a way of being successful. In the words of the Talmud, he's experienced miracles, meaning obviously no matter what words he would say, or whatever he would do would be successful because he davened for Hashem. God listened to him. And therefore, he's someone that God listened to and was able to perform miracles. They sent him. What do we see from here? To deal with a political foe in a nice way does not mean you have to convince yourself that the foe is not a foe. You know the foe is a foe. You know the anti-Semite is an anti-Semite. There's no one that knew it better than Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He had to hide 12 years from them. But this same person who knew very well who his enemy was could go and find a way to speak to them and annul the crazy decree that Jews should not, that Jews may not keep Shabbos or have a bris, and so on. So taking the soft approach has been something that our community has done, the Jewish community has done since the destruction of the Second Temple. And if you look at figure 4.1, it actually goes a period of 300 years of Jews living in Germany. Amen. Just 1 second, they're saying Kaddish. Amen. Amen. Yesh me Rabbanon Yisbarach. So if you look at figure 4.1 on page 123, you have over here a very interesting graph of Jews living in Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Austria. And it tells you in each one who did the Jews have as what they call Stadlan, someone that would intercede, a Jew that had some connections because of their position or money, that had some connection to government officials, and who would intercede when oppressive governments were enacting laws that were oppressive to Jews. Who were the people that did it? How did they do it? They didn't go there but with bullhorns and swords and so on. They tried to do the soft way, the Jacob way, to see if they could sort of take the steam out of the anti-Semite. Now again, this doesn't apply to people that are looking to annihilate us and get rid of us. We're not talking about the Hamans. But throughout history, there were people that didn't look to annihilate us, but they had no problem looking down on us, enacting laws that would oppress us or make us subservient. One of them we're going to read about in text number 7 is actually Marcus Lehmann, who was a great author, I believe from Germany. He actually wrote a book, which has been translated into English, 2 volumes about this individual. Called him the Court Jew. Yosef Roshai, right? He advocated on behalf of German Jews in the courts of the Holy Roman Emperor. Later, his grandson. These 2 rulers were no Jew lovers. Who was Charles V? He was a grandson of King Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, who expelled the Jews in 1492. So he is now approaching a grandson of these individuals. So follow in text number 7. In 1531, the denouncers once again hounded the emperor, Charles V, while he was in Belgium and Holland, lands uninhabited by Jews. Many requested that I travel to those lands to oppose the accusers with the help of God. I was at the court of the exalted emperor for 4 months, from the 1st of Adar until the 1st of Sivan, pursuing the interests of Jewish communities. Although Rothoit attempted to swallow me alive, I don't know who this person is, obviously. Someone didn't love us. And bring about my demise, God in his great mercy sent his messenger and saved me from his hands, from all those who sought to harm me. At that time, I had an audience with the emperor in his private chamber. I spoke to him for as long as I needed, and he responded sympathetically. During this period, when I had free time and was secluded in my room, I authored a book entitled The Sanctified Path. Amen. The specifics of his success are not the point. The point being is, who is he approaching? He's approaching a person who's the grandson of the people who expelled the Jews of Spain. Why is he even going to them? Why is he even going to such a person, right? Charles V was also the king of Spain, which meant he was presiding over the Inquisition at that time, 1530. Because the Spanish Inquisition continued much after 1492. But Joseph wasn't looking to bestow an honor to the righteous Gentile on Charles. He was just looking to get some grace and lessen the burden of the rules, of the laws that would be imposed upon the Jewish people. That's basically, and where did he get that from? Where did Jews in Middle Ages, where they get that from? They got that from Joseph, from Jacob. Even prior to the expulsion of Jews from Spain, it is well known that there were Jews that were very well connected in the government. And actually, if you look at the picture on page 126, it is told, I'm not sure if this picture is this person himself, but we know that Dan Yitzchak Abarbanel, the Abarbanel, who's also a great author, a commentator on the Torah, he's a wealthy Jewish scholar. He had set 3 separate audiences with the king, during which he and some non-Jewish allies managed to persuade the monarch to rescind the decree. This painting is an interesting legend that the terrible Torquemada, who was the head of the Inquisition, burst into the room and he yelled the following: Judas sold him for 30 pieces of silver. Now you want to sell him again? Meaning you think that you're gonna let the Jews buy influence in the government, and because of the pressure of the inquisitors, the Spanish monarchy sort of backed off, and they allowed the Inquisition and the expulsion to happen. But the point being that we find throughout the ages that whether it was the Abarbanel or Rabbi Yosef or Rosheim, throughout the ages, Jews went face to face with people that didn't have a great history of their attitude towards Jews to see what they could do to remove or to lessen the pressure that they were putting on the Jewish people. And that message comes from Jacob, how he approached Joseph, how he approached Esau. So the question is, how does it really work? If a person really despises Jews, what are we coming to them with soft words or with gifts or with other ideas to change their mind? They hate us. They hate us. And the answer is, hate is a very, very broad word. There are people who so-called have great Jewish friends and have from time to time expressed hateful words against Jews. And then there's the opposite. Non-Jews that behave like anti-Semites and say I'm an anti-Semite. My best friends are Jews. So what's going on over here? So here's an interesting reading, just to give you a little bit of the background of this. In 2006, I'm sure you heard of an actor that loves Jews. His name is Mel Gibson. Anyway, so actor Mel Gibson was pulled over for a speeding ticket. It turns out that the officer who pulled him over was Jewish, right? Because he was drunk. He breathalyzed the test, put on handcuffs. He finds that he's Jewish. He directed such anti-Semitic, slurs and curses. He said things like Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. You guys are disgusting, and so on. Amen. 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 Anyway, so the news media was all over the story. He's a famous actor, maybe not a politician, famous actor. So later, Gibson offered a public apology. He asked that people realize that he's not a bigot or an anti-Semite. And some commentators actually asserted that this story revealed that Gibson was an anti-Semite. Others, including some of Gibson's Jewish friends, Amen. 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 Just bear with me to the end of Kaddish. Amen. 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 So Gibson had a Jewish friend, Dean Devlin. He stated publicly he spends a lot of time with Gibson, and he is not an anti-Semite. He says Gibson's words was a result of alcohol, and nothing should be taken literally. Other people argue, you know what, when a person drinks, his true feelings come out. So what exactly is going on here? He obviously has Jewish friends. He's actually good friends with many Jews. So does he hate Jews, or does he love Jews? Or does he hate Jews, or he can tolerate Jews? What is it? So here's an interesting reading about how people's brains work. Not everything is everything or nothing. So in this book, the person who's intrigued by this story writes as follows: brains are like representative democracies. They are built of multiple overlapping experts who weigh in and compete over different choices. There's an ongoing conversation among the different factions of your brain, each competing to control the single output channel of your behavior. When the hostess at a party offers chocolate cake, you find yourself on the horns of a dilemma. Some parts of your brain have evolved to crave the rich energy source of the sugar, and other parts care about the negative consequences, such as the health of your heart. Part of you wants the cake, and part of you tries to muster the fortitude to forgo it. The final vote of the parliament determines which party controls your action. That is whether you put your hand up or out. As the French, I don't know, his name is Montague, puts it, there is as much difference between us and ourselves as there is between us and others. So we call inner conflict. Not everything is black and white. He uses this as a base to discuss the story with Mel Gibson. Returning to Mel Gibson and his drunken tirade, we can ask whether there is such a thing as true colors. You know, people say when you drink, your true colors come out. We've seen that behavior is the outcome of the battle among internal systems. To be clear, I'm not defending Gibson's despicable behavior, but I am saying that a team of rival brain can naturally harbor both racist and non-racist feelings. Alcohol is not a truth serum. Instead, it tends to tip the battle towards the short-term, unreflective faction, which has no more or less claim than any other factions to the true one. So he claims that a person is not bipolar. A person can, from one side, harbor some resentment towards Jews, but at the same time be friends with Jews because it's not everything or nothing. That's what he claims. And this might be the way Jacob looked at Esau. He knew that Esau was jealous of him. He knew that Esau was upset that he got, but it wasn't everything or nothing, because he thought that he had no choice. If he thought that there was no chance in the world that a gift would work, he wouldn't try it. Why would Jacob try it? He's wasting his time. Just prepare for war and go for it. No, Jacob knew that even though Esau hates him, that's not all of his brain. It's not everything. There is some part of him that could behave like a brother that would hug and kiss. Maybe it's a smaller part, but he knew that there is some part, and he wanted to tap into that. That doesn't make Esau a tzaddik. What do we see afterwards? Think about it. After Esau hugged him and kissed him, what happened afterwards? Esau offers Jacob some men for protection. Jacob says, no, whatever. Esau says, why don't you come with me? It's not like they became best friends and everything was hunky-dory afterwards. They parted their ways. Esau still was Esau. And he had this mixed bag, maybe more hatred, but there was something to tap into. And many times when people express anti-Semitic expressions and so on, it doesn't mean there is nothing, there is no redeeming factor within them that can be tapped in that we could, and it might be self-centered. Politicians can be something that would benefit them, or maybe there is some soft spot. And therefore, to take the sword option first is not necessarily the right thing. And that's what Jacob taught us. So the same, which now makes sense, the same Shimon Bar Yochai who says the law is Esau hates Jacob, that means Romans hate us. This same Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is capable of approaching them and trying to intercede and find some words, true with God's blessing, call it a miracle, but find the words that would tap in and to some sensitive part of them to get them to loosen their pressure on the Jewish people. So therefore, it's not, in many cases, it's not everything or nothing. And it works both ways, by the way. Because it's a mixed bag, many times you can have people that express positive views for Jews, and then we start taking them for granted. That's also a mistake, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and they can turn on a dime also. You need to know in both sides, the one that's against you might have some redeeming facts that can be turned around, and the same thing is the opposite. And here's an interesting two case studies, which the JLI put together. One is about Jesse Helms, and one is about the Prime Minister of France, Pompidou, who the Jews were very, very upset with because he went and sold these Mirage jets to Libya, claiming they're not in the conflict. So let's read what happened. Okay. So Pompidou in 1970 comes to visit America. President Nixon is the president then. And guess what? Jews are very upset with Pompidou, rightfully so. And Jews were much more pro-Israel then than now. And how did they react? They reacted with demonstrations and insults against him in some of the cities he visited in the United States. When he came to New York, there were such insults that were expressed to him that Nixon had to fly to New York to sort of apologize to him for what was going on. Look at text number 9. This is an article in the New York Times. President Nixon made a hurried trip to New York, page 131. President Nixon made a hurried trip to New York yesterday to apologize to President Pompidou, who was angered by what he termed insults to himself and his wife during pro-Israel demonstrations, touched off by his state visit to the United States. The French president has been angered by a jostling that members of his party received from demonstrators in Chicago, whose actions were marked by boos and angry cries, and by what he viewed as an acceptance of such hostile acts by the Chicago police. He thought that the Chicago police didn't do enough to stop this. So President Nixon flew to New York specifically to apologize to him. What's interesting is that the Rebbe, who was known for his farbrengens, for his gatherings, and what were the gatherings about? The gatherings were basically Torah lessons, Torah portion lessons, lessons in Hasidism, stories, but many times included current events. We have two clips over here of how the Rebbe reacted to the demonstrations against Pompidou at a farbrengen. This is what the Rebbe said. The public protests against the president of France angered French officials. This blocked any lobbying effects that French Jews might have been able to make to prevent or at least reduce French assistance to Arab countries that are hostile to Israel. The stated reason for these protests was to demonstrate that America is a democratic country, that American Jews are not cowardly. We'll stand up for what we believe. This is a worthwhile objective, said the Rebbe, when Jewish lives are not at risk. However, when Jews are threatened with the sale of many military jets to Libya, we have two options. We can organize public protests, or we can make every effort to either prevent or postpone the sale, reduce the number of jets sold, or to at least prevail upon the French to send less effective planes to Israel. Such aims can only be achieved through quiet diplomacy. The proof is that agreements of this nature have been reached in the past. Rebbe said that that these protests might make us feel good, but they're not effective because it stifles the diplomacy, and the diplomacy can, through back channels, accomplish things that are not in the newspapers. At another talk, in text number 10b, the Rebbe says as follows: when Mr. Pompidou visited the United States, there were mass protests against him intended to intimidate France. This effort backfired. It can now be said, this is later on, that despite the French embargo against selling arms to belligerents in the Middle East, the French president has allowed the sale of small arms and light weapons to Israel, items that can be sold without attracting publicity. However, as a result of the demonstrations, the approval of such sales was withdrawn. After some time, when he was no longer being disparaged, he resumed dealing with Jews behind closed doors and reinstituted the small arms sales. He also arranged for 300 Jews to be able to leave Egypt. All of this was accomplished without demonstrations and without publicity. The Jewish media was warned against disclosing any of this, and we now only know of this from the non-Jewish press. The conclusion we must draw from this case is that we do not influence anti-Semites by constantly yelling at them, "You're an anti-Semite, you're a thief, you're a murderer." Rather, engage them in diplomatic conversation. Although such individuals are well aware of what we think about them, they know what we think about them. They are nevertheless human beings and wish to behave like human beings. As the anti-Semite believes that he's a mensch, so to speak. He only has certain philosophies. If we can touch those feelings that he thinks he's a mensch, we can, through diplomacy, get a lot more than through demonstrations and screaming and belittling. And that was the Rebbe's take that, what did Jacob do first? Jacob had a backup plan, but what did he do first? He tried diplomacy. Another example is Jesse Helms. Jesse Helms was elected to the United States in 1972. For more than a decade, he voted constantly against the interests of Israel. For example, he voted against foreign aid to Israel. In 1982, after Israel invaded Lebanon, he suggested that the United States break off relations with Israel. Many pro-Israel groups were angered by Helms and tried to unseat him. What happened? In 1984, Chabad in Washington, D.C. held an event to celebrate the fact that Reagan and both the House of Congress designated the Lubavitcher Rebbe's birthday, 82nd birthday, as Education Day USA. Every year in the Senate, on the Rebbe's birthday, they would designate the day of his birthday as education. The Rebbe was very much into education, not just education of the Jewish children, but education in general. The purpose of this designation was to promote the Rebbe's campaign to upgrade the ethical and moral foundation of education in the American public schools. Among the many high-profile attendees at this event was Senator Jesse Helms. When Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz read about this, he was very upset. How can Chabad allow Jesse Helms a seat at this event, right? He wrote to the Rebbe objecting to Lubavitch honoring, quote unquote, Jesse Helms, considering that his voting record was staunchly against Israel. The Rebbe replied that the event did not honor Helms, but to the contrary, Helms came to honor and pay tribute to Chabad's commitment to education. The Rebbe then added a postscript to the letter. This is taken from a letter the Rebbe wrote to Alan Dershowitz. Text number 11. I trust you will agree that in regard to persons of influence, whether in Washington or elsewhere, the first objective should be to persuade and encourage such a person to use his influence in a positive way in behalf of any and all good causes which are important to us, meaning the Jewish people. We should welcome every public appearance which lends public support to the cause, especially when there is a likelihood that it may be the forerunner of similar pronouncements in the future. My experience with such people, this is the Rebbe writing to Dershowitz, my experience with such people, though I have never personally met the said person, referring to Helms, has convinced me that politicians are generally motivated more by expediency than by conviction. In other words, their public pronouncements on various issues do not stem from categorical principles or religious imperatives. Hence, most of them, if not all politicians, are subject to change in their positions depending on time, place, and other factors. I believe, therefore, that the proper approach to such persons by Jewish leaders should not be rigid. As a rule, it is no good to engage in a cold war, which may often turn into a hot war. Nor does it serve any useful purpose to brand anyone as an enemy or anti-Semite. However tempting it is to do, it can be very tempting. Even if that person vehemently denies it, it can only be counterproductive. On the contrary, ways and means should be found to persuade such a person to take a favorable stance, at least publicly. We haven't too many friends, and attaching labels, etc., to others will not gain us any friends. Instances abound where the approach advocated above produced good results. There is surely no need to point out to you that responsible Jewish leaders consistently cultivate good public relations, indeed even cordial relations with President Carter and his predecessors, going back to President Roosevelt, regardless of their sometimes openly negative feelings towards Jews and Jewish causes. What ended up happening in this case with Jesse Helms? Now I'm going to read to you of what Professor Dershowitz said many years later. When he recounted the story, he added a postscript of his own. Sure enough, this is what Alan Dershowitz himself said. Sure enough, very shortly after he was honored, he wasn't really honored, but whatever, he was given a seat, Senator Helms assumed a very influential role in the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee and became one of the strongest supporters of Israel and of other Jewish causes as well. So this is what Dershowitz says. So obviously the Rebbe had an enormous influence on persuading Jesse Helms that even with his very conservative values, he could become a beacon for the Jewish people in the Jewish state. Well, we don't really know what changed Helms. He's saying it's the Rebbe's giving him a seat. What changed Helms is not really the issue. The point being that the Rebbe always believed that people that vote negatively against you are not necessarily all black, and therefore we should endeavor through political and positive means to try to turn them around, but you can't do it by labeling people. If we just label people as anti-Semites, you basically label the person, you just made him the enemy when he might not be 100% their enemy. That's the point. And we learned this from Jacob and Esau. Are there any questions before we go further? You have a questions? You have to unmute yourself, Carol.
Okay. I lost the past like minute or two. I lost the audio. Is there any way I can reclaim that? What you were saying was fascinating. I feel so.
I basically read a letter of the Rebbe to Dershowitz,
right,
who was upset that Jesse Helms attended a Education Day USA get together, and he felt that by giving him a seat at this get together, we were honoring him, and he's someone that always voted against Israel. And the Rebbe basically said that that we don't have that many friends, and to label anyone that votes against us as an anti-Semite is not the prudent way to do it, because history has shown that many times politicians, especially who are not really speaking from convictions and so on, they have other ulterior motives and so on, they can be turned around. That's what the Rebbe wrote to the professor. The professor at a later date gave a speech, and he basically recognized that the Rebbe was right. He said, because what happened afterwards, Jesse Helms had a seat at the Foreign Relations Committee, and he became a staunch Israel supporter, the same one Dershowitz was so upset about, that he was given a seat at a gathering. This same guy turned around to ended up being a very, very pro-Israel advocate. So you see, he basically sort of admitted that the Rebbe's approach of trying with good channels to turn around politicians, even though they know that we think that what they're saying about us is wrong and we're upset about it. But putting someone in a corner and labeling them as an anti-Semite doesn't help anything. We have enough anti-Semites without that. And that's the approach. That's the approach that Jacob took with Esau, even though he knew Esau hated him. And he knew there's a good chance Esau coming with 400 men is going to try to fight. But he said there got to be some point in Esau, there's some soft spot within him that I could sort of tap into that and turn, and at least for this moment, turn them around, so to speak. That's how we have to deal. Again, we're not talking about Nazis or Hamans. That's a different ball game. But we're talking about people that might not be pro-Israel, but that doesn't mean that they hate us necessarily, or even if they dislike us, there is some humanity to them that maybe we can tap in and turn them around. That's the point. And by labeling them as anti-Semites or protesting against them doesn't necessarily help us. That's the point that we're making over here.
How do you determine where somebody's gone too far versus somebody that is spoke for?
You can only determine by endeavoring political means. You can only determine it. And you see throughout history, listen, if Yosef of Rosheim was trying to placate or to touch the soft spot of a grandson of those that expelled Jews, not only Charles V, not only was he a grandson, Spain was still under his dominion. There was still the expulsion. But being that he had influence in other countries, and we could try to gain favor and help us, we do that. There's always time for shutting people out. Diplomacy works a lot better than labeling people. That's the point that we're bringing out over here, and we see this from Jacob. And you see, Nachmanides says that throughout history, since the destruction of the Second Temple, throughout history, the Rabbi Yanai and many others who knew they were talking to people who were anti-Semites. They didn't like Jews, but they tapped into some soft spot and were able to gain things. Now, if you want to just feel good by labeling people anti-Semites and writing them off, it's good, but it doesn't really help the situation. That the Jesse Helms story shows that, and the story of the Pompidou, the Rebbe says that many things that were happening behind the scenes that most Jews didn't know about were happening through diplomacy between Jews, French Jews that had some influence in the French government, and through back channels, Israel was getting things that didn't attract attention. So the soft way is definitely the first attempt, and just like Jacob did. Okay.
There's an entity that creates a mailing every month, anti-Semite of the month, and at the end of the year, you vote who's the anti-Semite of the year. Based on this idea, that's a total waste of time.
I want to tell you that the Rebbe was against, by the way, it might surprise you, the Rebbe was against the protests that were going on in the 70s against Russia, because the Rebbe knew what was going on behind the scenes, and he knew the Russian mentality, and he believed that diplomacy and would do a lot more than the protests. So the bottom line is, when you face an adversary, don't write him off, because even an adversary might have some soft spots. I think, whatever, that's what's called outsmarting anti-Semitism. It's not only, we talk about fighting, we're always talking about fighting anti-Semitism. Maybe that's what this class is about, not just fighting anti-Semitism, but outsmarting anti-Semitism. Because ultimately, even a person that dislikes us likes themselves more than they dislike us, right? That one of the problems we have with the Arabs is, the Golda Meir said, if they loved their children more than they hated us, we'd have peace. So if you have an anti-Semite that hates us more than he loves his own children, you're right, then you got a problem. But most people that dislike other people, in this case, dislike Jews, they still like themselves more than they dislike Jews. They definitely like their families, or like their position, or like other things more than they dislike Jews. Mel Gibson might like his Jewish friends more than he dislikes other Jews, So it's a mixed bag, so to speak. So therefore, if we can tap in to the humanity, and the human nature is that I love my children more than I hate an enemy. That's the human nature. There is exceptions to the rule. That's right. Hitler hated us more than he loved his own people. So we're not talking about that type of people. We're not talking about that type of extreme. But as this article in neuroscience, the mind is a mixed bag, and if we can sort of tap in to some fearness, just because someone is unfair doesn't mean every part of the brain is unfair. If we could tap into some humanity, we shouldn't shut that out. And that's what Yaakov did with Esau. That's what Rabbi Yanai did with the Romans, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai did with the Romans. And throughout history, Jews who were dealing with real Jew haters, they found a way of talking to them diplomatically, and that at least lessened some of the terrible decrees that they were planning or actually executed against the Jewish people. That's the point. The Rebbe also believed if you want to lessen or diminish anti-Semitism, we have to be advocates of proper education of the child. We're not talking about Jewish children necessarily. We're talking about American children. Let's talk about America now. We're living in America. If children grow up thinking that education is math and science, or forget about children grow up, if teachers or parents believe that educating a child is for a child to get good grades in math and science, and if you've done that, you've been successful, that's a terrible mistake. Germans were also very, very knowledgeable in math and science. Very, very knowledgeable. Guess what? They used that to exterminate 6 million Jews and kill 50 million people. Just having a great degree in math and science or biology doesn't make you a mensch. And educating children, the Rebbe believed, Educating children is first and foremost to raise human beings, to raise people that are fair, to raise kind people. And that's what we have to put our efforts. Demonstrating and fighting anti-Semitism, we could spend billions of dollars fighting anti-Semitism, and let's take that money and educate youth to be mentioned, starting from when they're little kids. And that's why, by the way, the Rebbe is a big proponent of a moment in silence in the public schools. Prayer can get technical, who do you pray to, and so on. But a moment of silence where every parent can tell their parent can tell their child what they should think during the moment of silence. But the point being that there's a higher being, there's a higher source, where we do things that are right instead of things from wrong, not because there's a policeman that's going to lock us up. It's because there is real right and wrong. In other words, stealing is essentially wrong, not because you'll sit in jail, because it is wrong to steal, because the Creator said so. I'm just going to share this lesson video here. You'll have to come around here. Okay, 1 second. Sorry. I have to. 1 second, I did it wrong. I have to do sound. Give me the thumbs up if you see. Hold on. Give me a thumbs up. Do you see it?
Negative thoughts, actions, and speech create negative energy.
Up.
Conversely, positive thoughts, actions, and speech create positive energy. And that's what led, with an idea that has its genesis in South Africa, to the idea of ARC, acts of random kindness. You see, this is kind of shaped a little bit, more or less, if you use your imagination, like Noah's Ark. And the idea is, you take some change, you place it in here, and when it's filled up, we pass it along to someone less fortunate. It isn't just the money collected, it's the thought and the feeling that it represents.
So I went to a public school. I studied math and physics, and we studied how to solve math problems. I didn't know how to solve my own problems.
Rabbi David Aaron, a Jerusalem-based educator, reflects on his personal experience.
The real problems of life is what education should be focusing on. It's essentially about building people, and only great people will do great things.
It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan. Mr. President.
On March 30th, 1981, then President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, delivered a luncheon address at the Washington Hilton.
Thank you very much.
He left the hotel at 2:27 p.m., but as he headed to his limousine, a would-be assassin opened fire. Reagan was critically wounded, and the nation collectively gasped in horror. The president survived, and at a public gathering 2 weeks later, the Lubavitcher Rebbe insisted that the instructive lesson of the assassination attempt must similarly survive. The Rebbe saw the event as a wake-up call for the nation to upgrade its approach to education.
In der Beis Sefer meyusod und durchgenommen. Was darf geben, a Beis Sefer darf geben Jidis. Nicht darf ausformen, aufmachen, dem Jeser Leib Hodom, als soll sein mit Midis Tevis. Und soll wissen, als stark, als geht und lernt in dem Beis Sefer. Aber der Riker lernen seine ist. Was sie zum Ton Teva rumsich, und das ist der Teva Amiti für sich, und das ist im Ganzen nicht rein in der Tochnis und in der Programm von Besefer.
As much as we want to graduate mathematicians and scientists, we also want to graduate decent human beings.
Dr. Rona Novick, Dean of the Azrieli Graduate School of Jewish Education and Administration, has given ample thought to this problem.
Very few educators would invite a charismatic speaker or have a big assembly program to create readers. They would understand that the way that we build reading skills is piece by piece and building block by building block. We start in kindergarten and first grade, and we keep building on it. Well, we need to look at character education and social emotional learning in exactly the same way.
Judaism teaches us that it's important to give charity every day. And the more you give charity, that muscle of kindness within you gets stronger and stronger.
Rabbi Levi Greenberg and his wife Shana are emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in El Paso, Texas.
We embarked on a campaign to bring this message of daily giving to every single child in El Paso. And so we brought to El Paso the ARC campaign. All the children in the school received one of these boxes, and they were told that the purpose of this box is to be taken home and filled every day. If they have extra coins, they should ask their parents for some money. After a month of collecting money, their class would nominate charities that should receive their combined money. And the winning charity would receive the combined monies that they had collected throughout that month. The ARC project, giving money every day, takes acts of random kindness and turns them into acts of routine kindness.
Raising a generation of individuals empowered with a sense of purpose and trained to pursue acts of kindness is an important factor in curing and preventing numerous social ills, including the reduction of hate and bigotry, along with anti-Semitism.
The more we give, the more we respect. We respect human life, we respect property, the more dignity we have for ourselves and for society. If we want to stop anti-Semitism, we have to stop hatred. And we have the opportunity to nip hatred in the bud by increasing in acts of goodness and kindness and inspiring and encouraging all of humanity to do so. Every single person should give charity every day, and hatred will be a thing of the past.
The call of the hour, more necessary than ever, is for each of us to adopt a charity box for regular, daily contributions, and to encourage all around us, family and friend, Jew and non-Jew, to act similarly. Actively demonstrate, encourage, and promote kindness, sympathy, and altruistic care. If a little illumination eliminates a lot of darkness, think of what a rapidly swelling force of systematic goodness can achieve for our communities, and ultimately for humanity. It's time to turn up the light.
Okay, that was good. Hold on.
That was fabulous.
The point of this video is that there's a way to fight anti-Semitism, there's a way to outfight anti-Semitism. And if we want to raise the next generation of people that are caring, kind, and fair people, sensitive people, our schools have to be, I'm not talking about Jewish day schools, I'm saying public schools, have to be not giving just knowledge of science and so on. They have to be teaching the children what it means to care about others. This ARC, I didn't even know about this project till I prepared for this class. Just distributing these little rubber arcs where kids give every day. By the way, it's not just a mitzvah for kids, it's a mitzvah for every person to give tzedakah every day. In the shul, we have charity boxes. It says that during the prayer, the person should give charity. It's not just a means to collect money for the synagogue. It's to train people that every day you have to give. Every day we should give. Maimonides says that some people think I'll give once a year and I'll give as much as I would give throughout the year. Maimonides says it's better to give every day a little bit, because just the act, just every day the act of giving something of yourself to someone else, that itself refines a person and uplifts the person. The point being that there are many ways to sort of called outsmart anti-Semitism. Obviously, the Jewish education way is trying to raise a next generation of fear and humane people. But even those that already finished the education system, they're already in spheres of influence, whether people that are actors or have political positions and so on. We shouldn't write them all off. We could tap into the humanity that's still left within them and bring some means of help and assistance to the Jewish people, in this case, Israel, in the case of Jesse Helms. Anyway, so wrapping up the course, so let's go over what our approach is in general. So in figure 4.3, I'm going to wrap up the course. So in the first class, we learned about the importance of remaining calm and not living in fear from anti-Semitism, because there's nothing to fear other than fear himself. Fear basically paralyzes us. And on the contrary, Jews throughout history, even facing the worst challenges, although you have to do something, we know that the ultimate success is our faith in Hashem. Number one, we will remain calm. Number two, we will trust in Hashem and upgrade our connection with Him. We'll create natural means through which God can provide our security. We don't just daven, we do what we learned in the first class, and in this class, Jacob also prepared something he has to do in this physical world to bring about the blessing. We will not internalize anti-Semitism by altering our Jewish heritage. So we're not talking about compromising Judaism. On the contrary, we learned in the previous classes that compromising Judaism does nothing. On the contrary, you're just teaching anti-Semites that you retreat, so to speak. A Jew should be a proud Jew, whether it's a yarmulke or a Jew wears a chai, whatever you wear, whatever you display or don't hide about your Judaism, don't, God forbid, try to hide it because of anti-Semitism. We will be open about our Jewish identity, benefiting Jews and fostering diversity. We will share awareness of Hashem's mission for all humanity and thereby help individuals avoid experiencing the inner void. We learned about the ditch, the anti-Semite, the two types of anti-Semite, the Haman and the Achashverosh anti-Semite. We will thank God for divine gifts of the Holy Land and seek to strengthen the security and prosperity. We will avoid labels and public. Instead, we will work with whomever we can to ensure beneficial results for the Jewish people. And we'll do one more thing. Like we just said in the video, we'll put emphasis on educating the next generation to be proper human beings. And here's one other thing that we have to talk about, and that is sometimes we're so focused on the adversaries that are outside of our community and don't realize about the threat within our community. I'm not talking about Jewish anti-Semites, which we talked about. I'm talking about Jews not living in harmony ourselves. We are vulnerable to the anti-Semite when we are not united. United doesn't mean we all think the same, but we are one family. And we find that but when Haman came to Achashverosh and he described the Jewish people, we find he said an interesting thing. He says there is a nation, one nation, who is scattered between the people, right? Look in text number 12a on page 140. Haman told Achashverosh there is one nation that is scattered and dispersed among the nations throughout all the countries of your empire. What did he mean that they're scattered? On the contrary, if they're scattered, then they're not visible, and they're less of a threat. Why would Haman mention that? Some of the commentaries say he was trying to hint to Achashverosh that the Jews are not as powerful as you think, because they're scattered, not just geographically scattered, they're scattered mentally. They're not one homogeneous, united family. Look at text 12b. Haman claimed there is one nation that is scattered and dispersed. He was referring to the fact that Jews were internally divided. He argued that they would be unable to defend themselves because a discordant people cannot develop a cohesive strategy, nor would they pay heed to their leaders. Subsequently, when the Jews repented, there was unity among them, and they gathered in their cities with mutual love. We therefore sent packages of food to one another on Purim to demonstrate that this mutual love is a cause of our deliverance. Very interesting. Why did Mordechai and Esther and the sages of that time instituted that we should send shalach manos, we should send gifts of food to one another? What does that got to do with with the story of Purim. So Rabbi Yaakov of Lisa says the reason is because Haman tried to imply to Achashverosh that the Jews are vulnerable because they're not a united people. Our salvation came about that we became united. Sometimes, there's always peace in Israel when there's a war against them. I'm talking about among the Knesset parties. All of a sudden, when there's rockets flying, we're all one. Unfortunately, we become one when there's a threat from the outside. What he says is that our sages and Mordechai instituted gifts of food on Purim because our salvation came through Jewish unity. So a lot of effort is spent talking about anti-Semites, the threat from the outside, but the real threat to us is because we're vulnerable. When are we vulnerable? When we are scattered and we can't look in each other's faces. That's when we're vulnerable. So therefore, Jewish unity is a key in outsmarting anti-Semitism, because when non-Jews see that we are not united, that we're vulnerable, then they're encouraged, so to speak, like Haman was, to take that step that Haman did. And that's why, by the way, every day, 3 times a day in our prayers, the last blessing, how does the Amidah end? What's the last blessing of the Amidah? We say, Sim Shalom, right? Sim Shalom, place peace, right? Bracha, we ask Hashem to place peace and blessings and so on, and on the Jewish people, kindness and grace and so on. And then we say, Barcheinu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad, bless us, our Father, as we are one, because we feel one, which basically is telling us that when can we receive blessing? When are we successful? When we're one. Again, one doesn't mean we think and agree to everything, but a family to be one, they don't have to see things all the same way, but there's a way of talking to each other, there's a way of feeling about each other, and being there for each other. So part of sort of outsmarting anti-Semitism is Jewish unity. So it's education for the masses, it's Jewish unity, and the other things that we just talked about. So here are the key points of today's lesson. I'm going to share it with everyone here again, right here. I'll always let the video do the work for me. Here's the key points we learned today.
Lesson 4, Change of Heart. 1. The Torah's narrative of Jacob and Esau suggests that by employing the right words and deeds, we can influence those we deem to be against us. Accordingly, the 2nd century sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai traveled to Rome to win concessions for the benefit of the Jewish community, establishing a model followed by countless others, most famously the European court Jews of the early modern period. 2. Jews did not feel inferior while conducting diplomatic missions. They knew that the Jewish future depended on God, and that their job was to generate a garment behind which God could conceal his blessings. A firm belief that they were in God's hands inspired in them a sense of pride. 3. According to modern neuroscience, brains are built of multiple parts that weigh in concerning different choices, each part competing to control the single output channel of behavior. This explains why an individual with Jewish friends can nevertheless carry out a drunken tirade against Jews. Conversely, it explains why Jews can gain assistance from unlikely sources. 4. Today, we are finally able to campaign publicly against those who oppose us. However, it is often counterproductive to publicly brand individuals as enemies or anti-Semites. Slow to shame and quick to engage is still an effective route. 5. We must do everything possible to condition society to bring out the best in people rather than their more sinister elements. In the sphere of education, this means promoting an approach that is not restricted to acquiring information, but rather includes proper character traits, self-discipline, and the awareness that all humans are created to actively generate goodness in their environments. 6. Living in harmony with our fellow Jews enables us to better collaborate to ward off threats and promote our interests. Jewish mysticism teaches that God responds positively to Jewish unity, providing overt blessings of protection and goodness.
Okay. Shut this. Okay. Thank you. This concludes the fourth and final class. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, I'll endeavor to answer them. It definitely gives us a more zoomed out look at the problem instead of just zooming into the problem and seeing the threat, seeing it from a more global way. Hence the name of the class, Outsmarting Anti-Semitism instead of Fighting Anti-Semitism. Okay, any questions?
I have a question, actually.
Okay, good.
You're
on.
First of all, Rabbi, thank you so much. I thought it was excellent, and I got so much out of it, and I appreciate it very, very much. And my question is regarding the CEUs. Is there anything that I need to do at this point? It's for licensed professional counselors.
Oh, you're talking about for the credit system you're talking about?
Correct.
So I have the certificate of attendance for the attorneys. So Rabbi Levy is not here today, but he has the information for the credit. So if you can email him, respond to his emails. He's been sending emails before each class. For the JLI class, just send the email to him and he'll tell you what has to get done.
Terrific.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, happy Thanksgiving. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. 1 second. Carol?
I just wanted to piggyback off of this lesson. It reminds me very much of a book that I highly recommend, which I read not long ago, called Rising Above Hatred by Derek Black. Derek Black was the godson of David Duke. He was supposed to be David Duke's successor, and he was being groomed. He was sent to some community college in Florida to become educated like David Duke. And while he was there, he met a diverse population. He met Jews, and he met somebody from Chile. He met South Americans. He met just his paradigm started changing a little bit. He realized he liked these people, even though he was supposed to hate them. It was actually somebody who identified as Jewish, identified as Orthodox Jewish, who invited him to a Shabbat dinner, invited Derek Black to a Shabbat dinner. And that's when this small community started working on him and tapped into his, being young and somewhat malleable. It just reminded me very much, I think it's a great read. So anyway, Derek Black became he reversed his position and fell out of the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan.
I've heard of it. There's a few. There's actually I forgot the name of the book I read many years ago about someone who was part of the Ku Klux Klan that actually, opened up his mind, or I forgot how, who he was exposed to and how he started thinking this is all crazy. The point is, we shouldn't write off everyone. Doesn't mean we have to agree what they do, but people can be turned around. Not everyone. People can be turned around. Hanukkah is coming, and part of the class was that when Jews thought that they would placate the anti-Semites by being like them, they thought they would stem anti-Semitism. It didn't work Hanukkah. On the contrary, the Jews that were proud of who they actually brought us the holiday. So everyone should not forget, Sunday night starts the 8-day holiday of lighting a candle each night. And we add a candle, Sunday it will be 1, Monday night 2, and so on. We're going to have a public menorah lighting in the mall on Sunday at 4 o'clock at the Free Old Raceway Mall in front of Macy's. It's going to be shorter because of COVID restrictions. It'll be shorter than usual, more separate and so on. But there will be donuts, and there'll be music, and there'll still be a great celebration of Jewish pride. Also on Monday we have a Menorah Parade. We put the menorahs on cars, and we parade with the cars down Route 9 to also free out Raceway Mall. They gave us an outdoor place where we have a menorah with a music truck and so on. There'll also be in Hebrew a concert, an Israeli concert. It's for Hebrew, it's for Hebrew speaking people, but anyone can go. Everyone's welcome to go. You could find that on our website. And just plug into events that are going on for Hanukkah. It's a great time to identify our Jewish pride. Have a happy Thanksgiving and a freilacha and joyous Hanukkah.
You as well.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very
Happy
good.
Hanukkah, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Also, one second, I just want to mention, we have these Happy Hanukkah lawn signs that, you give any donation you want, give no donation, you put on your sign, put it on your lawn. It's Happy Hanukkah from our family and the Chabad community. And it has the top a tagline, 8 nights, 8 lights. And we've got very great feedback from it. Creates a Hanukkah atmosphere. So we have it here at Chabad. Stop by sometime this week and pick up a lawn sign and put it in your lawn. Right?
We have ours up already.
You have yours up already? Okay, great.
Yep.
Come by, get your lawn sign. We got unbelievable feedback. Last night, someone was here and said to me, Rabbi, I was blowing my leaves and I see a guy walking in front of my lawn, looking, and then walks back, and I don't know what he wants. And then when I finish blowing my leaves, comes over to me, he says, when is Hanukkah? And it was someone that just moved a week or two ago down the block, someone from Brooklyn, an elderly man. He didn't know when Hanukkah was, and he saw the sign, Happy Hanukkah. And so he told him about when Hanukkah starts. He wants to light Menorah. So it might remind Jews that have forgotten about Hanukkah or think Hanukkah is for kids. It's a children's holiday, which it's obviously a children's holiday. It's a holiday for all the Jewish people. It reminded him. So we've been getting great feedback from these lawn signs. So come by and pick up a lawn sign and have a happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah,
Chag
Rabbi.
Sameach.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah, everybody.
Okay, be well.